I thought I knew everything about my grandmother. She raised me, she knew my favorite food, remembered every birthday, and somehow always knew when something was wrong before I said a word. So when she passed away, I thought there were no surprises left. I was wrong. 3 days after her funeral, I found something hidden in the back of her closet, an old locked wooden box, and written across the top was my name. I wish I had walked away. My grandmother passed away on a quiet Thursday morning. No warning, no dramatic goodbye, just a phone call. At 7:12 in the morning, my mom's voice sounded strange, like she'd been crying for hours. She said, "Honey, Grandma's gone." I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. Your brain does this weird thing when someone dies out at first. The words don't feel real. You think maybe if you wait long enough, someone will call back and tell you there was a mistake. But nobody called. The funeral happened 3 days later. People showed up with flowers, food, and stories I had already heard 100 times. Everyone kept saying the same things. She lived a beautiful life. She's in a better place. And I know they meant well, but none of it felt real, because to me she wasn't somebody people talked about in past tense, just she was my grandma. The woman who called me every Sunday, the woman who still kept printed recipes, the woman who somehow had cash hidden all over the house after everyone left. My mom handed me a small set of house keys. She looked at me and said, "Whenever you're ready, we should clean the house." I nodded. At the time, I didn't know walking back into that house would change everything I believed about my family, because hidden inside that house was something my grandmother never wanted anyone to find, and somehow she left it for me. Two days passed before I went back. I kept telling myself I was busy, but honestly, I just didn't want to walk into a world where my grandmother no longer existed. That house had always felt alive. There was always something happening. The TV too loud. Something cooking on the stove. Daughter asking me if I wanted food even when I had already eaten. This time, I already knew what I was walking into. Silence. I parked outside around noon. Same white fence. Same flower pots. Nothing looked different, which somehow made it worse. The world looked exactly the same, except she wasn't in it anymore. I sat in my car for a minute, then another, before finally grabbing the keys. The front door opened to Isley, and immediately, that smell hit me. You know how somebody's house always smells the same? Old books, laundry soap, cinnamon, that was her house. For 1 second, my brain expected her to turn the corner and say, "You're late," but nobody came. I walked through the house slowly. Living room, kitchen, dining table. Everything exactly where she left it. Her reading glasses, a half-finished crossword puzzle, a grocery list. Touching anything felt wrong. Like moving things meant admitting she wasn't coming back. Then something strange happened. I walked into her bedroom and stopped. Something felt off. Not scary, just wrong. Like walking into a room and instantly knowing something had changed, but not knowing what. I looked around. The bed looked normal. The lamps looked normal. The curtains looked normal. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling, so I started cleaning, folding clothes, opening drawers, making small piles. Keep, donate, throw away. Then I opened her closet. That's when I noticed something I had never seen before. The back wall looked deeper than I remembered. I stepped closer, moved a few old coats aside, and for the first time that day, got that feeling, the one that tells you maybe you should stop. But I didn't, because if there's one thing my grandmother taught me, it's that secrets don't stay hidden forever. I moved the coats to one side, then reached out and touched the back wall. That's when I realized it wasn't a wall, it was wood, thin wood. Like somebody had covered something up. I froze because I had been in that closet 100 times growing up, looking for blankets, playing hide and seek, helping my grandma organize winter clothes, and somehow I had never noticed it. I pushed gently, nothing. Then harder, still nothing, until I noticed a tiny metal edge near the corner. I pulled it, and the wooden panel moved. Behind it was a narrow, hidden space, just enough room to store something. My chest tightened, because sitting inside covered in dust was an old wooden box. It wasn't fancy, no decoration, no gold, just dark wood, scratches, worn, edges, and a small brass lock. It looked old, really old, the kind of thing people keep because throwing it away never feels right. I reached forward and pulled it out. Dust covered my hands, and that's when I saw it written across the top in faded black ink was my name, my full name. I just stared at it. Suddenly, this didn't feel random anymore. This wasn't something forgotten. This wasn't storage. Someone put this here, and somehow it was meant for me. My grandmother had hidden this for years, maybe decades, and she never mentioned it. Not once. I sat on the floor holding the box, thinking, should I open it, or should I call my mom? Because opening it suddenly felt wrong, like reading somebody's private journal, like crossing a line. Then another thought hit me. If she didn't want me to find it, why put my name on it? I checked the lock, no key. I looked inside the closet, nothing. Checked the shelves, drawers, her nightstand, nothing. Then I turned the box over, and taped underneath was a tiny folded note. My hands started shaking. I peeled the tape back carefully, opened the note. There were only 6 words written on it. If you found this, open it alone. No signature, no explanation, just that. And suddenly I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth anymore. I read the note again. If you found this, open it alone. That was it. No love, Grandma. No explanation. No date. Just 6 words. And somehow they made the room feel smaller. I looked around her bedroom. Everything looked normal. Quiet, afternoon, sunlight coming through the curtains, which made this feel even stranger. I pulled my phone out, thought about calling my mom, thought about taking the box home, thought about pretending. I never found it, but I couldn't, because once you know there's a secret, too, can't unknow it. So I stayed. I checked the closet one more time. Nothing. Nightstand. Nothing. Nothing. Then I remembered something. My grandmother used to keep random things in strange places, cash inside. Cookbooks, batteries in cookie tins, important papers hidden inside old magazines. So I started looking differently. I opened the top drawer beside her bed. Tissues. Pens. Old receipts. An old jewelry box. Inside. Earrings. A necklace, and taped underneath a tiny brass key. My chest tightened because suddenly this didn't feel accidental anymore. She knew somebody would find it. I brought the box onto the bed. Sat there for a second, took a breath, put the key in. Click. That sound, I still remember it. I opened the lid slowly, and for a second I thought I opened the wrong thing. There wasn't jewelry. No money. No documents. Just 3 things. A stack of old letters, a photograph, and one sealed envelope. On the envelope, my name. I picked up the photo first. It looked old, maybe 30 or 40 years old. My grandmother looked younger, early 20s. She was smiling, but she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was a little girl, around 7 years old, holding her hand. I stared at the picture because I had never seen that girl before. I turned the photo over, written on the back, summer 1983, our last day together. I read it twice. Our last day together. Who was this girl? And why had nobody ever talked about her? I slowly reached for the sealed envelope. My hands felt cold because I knew something, whatever was inside, was bigger than I expected. I opened the envelope. Inside was one handwritten letter. The first line said, "If you're reading this, there's something I never told anyone." I stared at the letter for a second. My name was written on the envelope, my grandmother's handwriting. And suddenly, I didn't want to open it anymore. Until now, she was still exactly who I thought she was. But once I read this, there was no going back. I unfolded the paper. It began, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if I waited this long to tell you why, hope one day you'll understand why there are parts of my life I never shared. Not because I wanted to lie, but because some truths feel impossible to explain." I stopped reading because this already didn't sound like her. My grandmother wasn't dramatic. She wasn't secretive. She told everyone everything, or at least that's what I thought. I kept reading, "There's someone in that photograph, someone nobody talks about anymore." For years, I convinced myself forgetting was the right thing, but forgetting and healing are not the same thing. Looked back at the photo, the little girl holding my grandmother's hand, smiling, like she belonged there. Then I reached the next lines. "Before I became your grandmother, before I became your mother's mother, I was somebody else. And once I had another child." I stopped, read that line again. Another child. My grandmother had another child. That didn't make sense. My mom never had siblings. Nobody ever mentioned this. Not once. Okay, sat there, frozen. And suddenly, small memories started coming back. Conversations. Stopping when I walked into rooms. Old photo. Albums missing years. Questions nobody answered. Things I never thought about before. And for the first time, they didn't feel random anymore. I turned the page. "You're probably confused. Your mother doesn't know everything. Nobody does." I made sure of that. My chest tightened. My mother doesn't know. Then who was this for? Why me? At the bottom, one sentence was written separately. "If you want the truth, look behind the blue plates in the kitchen." That was it. End of page. I looked at the bedroom door. Then toward the hallway. Then back at the letter my grandmother had hidden. A box. Hidden a photograph. Hidden a child. And now she was pointing me somewhere else. The kitchen, behind the blue plates. Suddenly, cleaning the house didn't matter anymore. I stood up and walked out of the room. I stood outside the bedroom for a second. The letter was still in my hand. My heart was beating harder than it should have been. Because suddenly this didn't feel like cleaning out my grandmother's house anymore. It felt like she was leading me somewhere. And I had no idea if I wanted to follow. I walked downstairs slowly. The house felt different now. Same walls, same furniture, same quiet. But now, every room felt like it was hiding something. I reached the kitchen, looked around. Nothing unusual. Coffee machine, fridge, old magnets, and the same blue plates she had used my whole life then. I remember look behind the blue plates. I opened the cabinet, stack of plates. Same ones from every family dinner. I started moving them 1.2.3. Behind the stack taped to the cabinet wall was a small brown envelope. No name. No date. Just one sentence written on the front. Don't judge me. I smiled for a second, not because it was funny, because that sounded exactly like her. Like she somehow knew I'd be standing there. I opened the envelope. Inside 3 photographs and a folded hospital paper. I picked up the photos first. The first one, my grandmother, the same age as before, holding the little girl, both smiling. The second, the same girl, standing alone outside a small white house. Then I picked up the third photo and my chest tightened because this time someone had been cut out. You could still see part of a shoulder, part of a hand, but the rest gone, removed on purpose. I unfolded the document. Old hospital record, faded. Date August 1983. Patient my grandmother. Relationship mother. Then child. Female. Name covered with black marker, completely hidden. I looked at it again because suddenly this became impossible to ignore. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't memory. My grandmother had a child, a real child. Someone existed. Someone disappeared. And somebody wanted that erased. I checked inside the envelope. Again, thought it was empty. But something small slipped out. A folded sticky note, her handwriting. It said, "You're asking the wrong question. Don't ask where she went. Ask who took her." I stopped breathing for a second. Took her? What does that even mean? Nobody gives away a child and writes it like that. Nobody hides 40 years of photos. Nobody leaves clues. Unless what happened wasn't a choice. I read the note again. Don't ask where she went. Ask who took her. I stood there in the kitchen holding that tiny piece of paper. And that's when something hit me. Up until now, I had been assuming this story was about my grandmother, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe this whole thing was about somebody else. Sat at the kitchen table, spread everything out, the photo, the hospital, paper, the letters, the note, and then I started remembering things. Not memories exactly, more like moments I never questioned. When I was around 10, I remember asking my grandmother once if she ever wanted more kids. She stopped what she was doing just for a second, then smiled and said, "Some people lose things they never stop looking for." At the time, I thought she meant dreams, or opportunities. I wasn't so sure. I went back upstairs, bedroom, closet, drawers, looking for anything. Then I noticed something. The bookshelf, one shelf looked cleaner than the others, like something had been moved. I checked behind the books, nothing. Then an old photo album shifted. Something thin slipped out, a folded newspaper. Clipping, old, yellow, dated, October 1983. The headline said, "Local child reported missing." Stopped reading, because underneath there was a photo, same little girl, same face, same hair, same child. I kept reading, female, age 7. Last seen near family residence. Then the name, Emily Carter. Look again, Emily Carter. That wasn't her last name. I'll read it one more time. Emily Carter. Missing. Nobody told me someone went missing. Nobody talked about this. Nobody admitted she existed. My grandmother didn't lose a child. According to this, someone took her. Then I turned the newspaper over. On the back, my grandmother had written something. is where everyone started lying. I looked at the article, then the photo, then the hospital record, and suddenly one question hit me. If Emily wasn't my mother's sister, then who was she? And why did my grandmother believe someone took her? I sat down on the bedroom floor, newspaper in one hand, photo in the other, and suddenly nothing made sense anymore. A missing child, hidden letters, secret photographs, hospital records, and my grandmother, the woman who labeled leftovers and never broke rules, had hidden all of this. I went back to the box that there were still unopened letters inside. I hadn't touched them. Honestly, part of me hoped I'd find a normal explanation, something simple, something boring. Instead, I picked the smallest envelope written across the front. Read this only after you find Emily. Emily. The first time my grandmother actually used her name. I unfolded the letter. It started, if you found the article, then you already know what everyone believed. But belief and truth are not always the same thing. Emily wasn't kidnapped. Emily was taken. They stopped reading. That sentence didn't make sense. Kidnapped, taken. What's the difference? I kept reading. It was 20-6. Alone. Scared. And people decided things for women back then. One day people came and told me I wasn't fit to raise her. And I was told if I fought, I would lose everything. Stopped. My chest tightened. Because suddenly, this didn't sound like crime. It sounded like somebody had power. I kept reading. And your family never knew because I never told them. Not because I forgot, but because shame is a strange thing. After enough years, silence starts feeling normal. I looked at the paper, and for the first time I wasn't asking why didn't she tell us. I was asking how long did she carry this alone. Then I reached the final paragraph I looked for. Emily, for years, birthdays, Christmas, every state record, every phone book, every dead end, and then one day stopped. Not because I gave up, because I realized she deserved peace. Even if I never got mine, I started crying, not dramatic, crying, just quiet, because suddenly my grandmother didn't feel mysterious anymore. She felt human. Then I reached the final lines. There's one thing I never told anyone. You've already met her. I froze, read it again, then again, met her. I met Emily. That's impossible. I would remember, right? I looked around the room, my mind racing, one thought repeating. If Emily was Reland, I already met her, then who was she? I read that line again. You've already met her. I stared at the page, waiting for my brain to make sense of it, but nothing happened. Because there was no way, no memory, no person, nobody in my life fit that story. Unless I didn't know who I had met. I carried everything downstairs, letters, photos, notes, spread them across the dining table. I looked at every face, every date, every detail. Then something caught my attention, one of the old photos, the same picture of my grandmother and Emily. But this time I looked at the background. Behind them, standing near a fence, was another woman, older, smiling, looking directly at the camera. And suddenly I knew her, not from photos, real life. My chest tightened. Because 6 months ago, my grandmother's birthday, there was a woman there, mid-40s, quiet, kind, she wasn't family, or at least that's what everyone said. My grandmother introduced her as an old family friend. I remembered that now. She stayed for maybe 30 minutes, brought flowers, hugged my grandmother, and before she left, they held hands. Longer than normal. Ran back upstairs, opened the box again. There was one envelope left, small, sealed, written, across the front for when you finally understand. I opened it. The letter began, "If you reached this letter, you finally noticed her. Emily found me, not the other way around." I stopped, kept reading, 3 years ago. She contacted me. She knew who I was. She had known for years. She came once. We talked. We cried. We forgave. Then she asked me for one thing. No. Family introductions. No explanations. No reopening old wounds. She built her own life, and I respected that. I lowered the letter. Emily wasn't missing. She wasn't gone. She existed. She found her mother, and then she left again. Not because she was angry. Not because she hated anyone. Life had simply moved forward. At the bottom, one final message. Okay, never wanted you to find Emily. I wanted you to know she existed. Some stories don't end happily. They end peacefully. I folded the letter slowly. Then I realized there was still one question left. Why did she leave all of this for me? I sat there holding the letter. The house was quiet again. Same house. Same kitchen. Same afternoon sunlight. But somehow nothing felt the same anymore. My grandmother wasn't who I thought she was. Not in a bad way. Not because she lied. Not because she hid things. But because for the first time I realized she had a whole life before she became grandma, I looked around and suddenly started seeing things differently. Her old habits, her routines, her quiet moments, the way she sometimes stared out the window, the way she always told people, be gentle. You never know what somebody's carrying. And for the first time, I wondered if she wasn't giving advice. Maybe she was telling her story. I picked up my phone, looked at my mom's contact. For a second, I almost called. Then I stopped because I remembered the letter. I never wanted you to find Emily. I wanted you to know she existed. And suddenly I understood this wasn't unfinished business. This was closure. Before leaving, I went back upstairs, closed the box, put everything back inside. Then I noticed something written on the inside of the lid. Small. Easy tomb is. It said people are more than the version. Love him anyway. I stood there for a second, then closed the lid, locked the box, but I didn't hide it. I brought it home, put it on my bookshelf, not because of the secret, but because now it felt different. It wasn't proof. It wasn't evidence. It was her story. A chapter nobody knew existed. A week later, I visited her grave, sat there quietly, and for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I felt something else, respect, because she wasn't perfect. She wasn't some magical grandmother with no mistakes. She was a person, someone who loved, lost, waited, and kept going. I still think about Emily sometimes. I don't know where she is. I don't know if I'll ever know. But maybe that was never the point. Because sometimes the truth doesn't change the past. It just helps you understand it. And sometimes the people we think we know best still have hidden chapters